Victor Ostrovsky is our guest. We had him on many years ago about his book, On the Other Side of Deception. And, of course, the first book was a New York Times #1 bestseller, By Way of Deception, and that turned into a big court case when the Israeli government filed a suit trying to block it that went to the Supreme Court. And you can go to his different websites, thebookpatch.com, where alternative books can be published online, or you can go to his fine art website as well, and we'll give you both of those coming up. But I wanted to get him on because I saw a Washington Post headline yesterday where he basically criticized what happened, and he called it stupid. It was stupefying stupidity, I believe, was the quote. And he is uniquely qualified to talk about this because he was an Israeli naval commander. He was also the head of the Israeli Naval Weapons Development Program. And then he was also a case officer in the Israeli Mossad. And then he left and spoke out about corruption, disinfo they gave the government, and other things. We were talking during the break before he came live, because he hadn't been on in probably 4 or 5 years or longer. And I said to him, well, just to be clear, I'm not part of the religion of hating Israel, and I'm also not part of the religion of worshiping Israel, because it seems like there's two different polarized camps, and I make both sides mad at me. I just think every government's corrupt and out of control, like Thomas Jefferson said. And I think Israel, just from a layman's term, why not just stop the propellers? Why not just let it come into dock and then follow any weapons via satellite? I mean, it was definitely a PR disaster, and now you got Turkey coming in with ships. You got another flotilla coming in with Nobel laureates on board, and you got the North Korea situation with the U.S. George Washington going there. All these crises popping up right now. We couldn't have a better guest on than Victor. So, Victor, break it down for us first, your experience in the Israeli Navy and then in the Mossad. I mean, I can't think of anybody better to speak about this, and the point you made in the Washington Post that you believe the actual boots on the ground who have the expertise were ignored, and that Netanyahu and others were running this. And so we'll talk about your history, what you think happened, what was wrong, and what you think they'll do next, knowing their mindset.
Well, first of all, this kind of like united all the extremists in Israel. Shouting. Actually, when you read in the Israeli papers the commentary after the articles, they're saying, "Well, let them come again. We'll send them back in coffins." I mean, this is the kind of crowd mentality that you get when things like that take place. Netanyahu already announced today that he's willing to consider changing changes in the blockade on Gaza and bring in international forces that would be helpful in checking materials that are coming in and out. So basically, what they tried to do with this flotilla had succeeded. They wanted to point to a situation which is very disastrous, very bad for the reputation of Israel. This blockade holding so many people in such a dire strait. The stupidity, in my opinion, was on the tactical side, not necessarily just the political. Because sometimes I look at people and you see all the actors and all these people come and talk about politics and what they would do and whatever. And just because people know their name, they think they have a right to an opinion. I'm not a politician, so put that aside. Look at the tactical side of it. Here come ships loaded with civilians who what they are carrying. There are no weapons aboard. The Turkish government has checked that. It is your ally. You're about to have a military exercise with the Turks in the Mediterranean. So it's not really an enemy, right? And they're saying there are no weapons aboard. So, take the steps and make it like... try to stop them outside the territorial water. The Navy can do that. The Israeli Navy, the Israeli commandos, probably the best in the world in doing that after the SEALs, the American SEALs. They could have stopped them quietly. The guys on board would not even know what happened. But first of all, even though you have the San Remo naval, manual that allows you to board ships if you have an embargo on an area, outside your territorial waters, why go there? Why not let them cross into the territorial waters? It's still way out of range. I mean, you're talking about 12, 14 miles. Let them in. and then take whatever exercise you do. So at least you're taking one bad block off the table. You're not in international waters. Secondly, the raid itself, the way they came into the ship, that was stupid. I mean, I've worked with these commandos. You can come down from a helicopter 4 at a time. They chose to come down 1 at a time because of the narrow area that they had at the top of the ship. Who comes in the top of the ship? Why not at the bow or the stern, where you have at least 2 or 3 areas that are protected? The whole operation was stupid. You clearly saw that this was something that was kind of pulled at the last minute, like somebody was shouting, go, 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 we don't have any time, let's do it, let's do it. And they had months to plan for this. So there goes my stupid, and it's stupid.
Well, I think it would have been politically smarter just to let the ships in. If you know they were searched in Turkey, you know there's not weapons other than clubs. Let them bring the aid into Gaza.
Well, now you're talking on the political side. Here's the problem. The Israelis have stopped the bringing in of supplies into Gaza to a point where, for example, you can bring in, cinnamon, but you can't bring in cardamom. They have lists of things that the soldiers and the officers are busy making sure what comes in and what doesn't come in. The blockade is not just against weapons. They're not allowing construction materials like concrete and metal, because they're saying the metal will be used for missiles, the concrete will be used for bunkers. They don't, and yet they had, and this is after the last raid into Gaza, which demolished 35% of all houses there. So the blockade is not just against weapons. It doesn't allow a variety of foods. It only allows a very limited amount of medical equipment. So the lists are very long. This is a humanitarian problem with the blockade itself. This is not typical Israeli behavior. This is something that is almost vicious in its behavior to that. That would never have been done and never has been done in the West Bank. They're trying to basically tell the populace in Gaza, as long as you have the Hamas as your leaders, you're going to be suffering. And that's against the Geneva Convention. It's against everything else. You cannot.
And that's also historically just going to turn the population who wasn't radicalized to Hamas and only make them dig in.
Absolutely. And we know that. I mean, the bottom line, there's the philosophy that always was prevalent in Israel was you can't fight ideas with force. The only way you fight an idea is with a better idea. And this has been forgotten. It's like we can force them to surrender. And we know that's not possible. I mean, as we had a blockade against the state of Israel before it was a state. It was still Palestine. And the British put a blockade, and it didn't help. We kept bringing in people. We brought in arms. We fought them off because the stronger they fought, the harder we fought back. This is the way people are. There are 3 kinds of terrorism. There's a psychological or what's called ideological terrorists. You have the territorial terrorists, and you have the Looney Tunes. Well, the Looney Tunes and the ideological ones you can usually beat, but the territorial ones you can't. These are people fighting for freedom on their land. They almost always succeed. I mean, take it from starting from the American Revolution, and you go through every time. You've
got Vietnam, you've got the 80s with the Afghans and the Russians. I mean,
it's always, the people who have the ideological ones, which used to be like the Baader Meinhof or the Red Army Brigades or any one of those, they have disappeared in time. That's why Al-Qaeda, for example, tries to latch itself on to a territorial terrorist groups. That's why Al-Qaeda wants to be tied in with groups like the Hamas, like the people in Yemen, because they need a territorial background and the suffering of a people to recruit new people to their lines. The Gaza is like the magnet for all these terrorist organizations.
It's the Mecca
against the West.
It's the Mecca.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's no question about that. And the suffering there is unbelievable. I mean, people don't understand what we're talking about. Going to the Gaza Strip, Soweto in South Africa, at its worst, was a paradise compared to what's going on in Gaza.
It's incredible. In the time we've got, I want to get into your books and some of the things you criticized the Israeli government and the Mossad did when you were involved in it, and also the Navy. But you talked about militarily, if they were going to do this, you would go in an open-top wet submarine, or basically a glorified underwater Sea-Doo. And then basically, there's a lot of different ways to disable those propellers. And then it doesn't give the people wanting to have this big standoff, the spectacular event.